Spike.
And I'm Dano.
And welcome to Dude It Yourself.
Brought to you by Dudes Unlimited.
Today we're here in my kitchen and we're getting ready to brew our very own batch of homemade beer.
Well, what do we do for brewing a batch of homemade beer?
Well, the very first step of doing anything with a home brewery is the most important. And that is have a beer.
Cheers.
Cheers. Next time we'll have a better beer.
I hope.
Yeah. Okay. Now, after we've done that, we move on to the, the minor stuff. First thing we need to do is make a yeast starter.
What is a yeast starter?
A yeast starter is normally, and it's entirely acceptable, you get your liquid yeast, you can use dry yeast, there's all kinds of different yeasts you can use. But I use liquid yeast because it's readily available for me and you get more variety. There's more varieties of liquid yeast available. Now, it's okay to pitch this by itself. If you don't have the equipment to do a yeast starter, you can go ahead. You don't need to. These have 100 million or 100 billion active cells in it. That's not near as much as it sounds. So we make a yeast starter, which is like a miniature batch of beer, to help the yeast kind of expand, grow, multiply, so that whenever you're ready for your brew day here in a couple of days, instead of 100 billion cells, we've got 300 or 400 billion cells. We get a more complete fermentation that way.
Okay, so what is a yeast starter?
Okay, a yeast starter, in the technical terms, is a small batch of beer. We make it with just two main ingredients, aside from the water, obviously, but we use dry malt extract and yeast nutrient. That's really all that goes into it. Of course, yeast, but that's kind of a given.
So what does the yeast nutrient do for this?
Well, it's kind of, you can't have one without the other. And the malt extract provides the sugars that the yeast will consume. The yeast consumes sugar and oxygen and converts them into alcohol and carbon dioxide. The yeast nutrient is like a multivitamin for it, really. It's full of all sorts of yummy stuff that yeast love to consume. It helps the yeast become more active and multiply faster.
Oh, so it's kind of like Barry White and Silk Sheets.
Yeah, I guess. I never thought of it. Yeah. Okay, so we're all you need to do to make it, you'll need a flask or a container or anything. I have an Erlenmeyer flask. It's generally the way that people do it. As long as it can hold the liquid you need, have a little bit of headroom for a little bit of foam, and that you can close it up in a way that will allow air to come out but not come in. Like, we're going to use a stopper and an S-bubble airlock. You can use a foam stopper. You can use a piece of plastic wrap with a rubber band loosely tied around it. That'll allow it to burp air out but not breathe air in. The important part is that you don't let any bacteria get in. So what we're going to do, since we're going to make a 2-liter starter, we're going to need a little more than 2 liters of water because we're going to boil some of this off.
Makes sense.
So 2 liters of water, roughly, and 1 cup of this malt extract. I'd say I may have got a little bit of moisture inside that Ziploc bag. Grab a spoon, give her a little heat. Dano, can you give that a stir for me while it's heating up?
Of course.
I'll get the yeast nutrient in here. We need 1 teaspoon of the yeast nutrient.
Now, is it possible that I could overstir this? Or?
No. No, we want it completely dissolved, so. And basically, once we get this stirred in, we just wait for a boil. Now, while we're waiting for that, I want to tell you a little bit about the cleaning process. As I said, keeping everything from getting bacteria is incredibly important. We're using live yeast. It's very susceptible to wild strains of yeast that can infect it, and bacteria can infect it. So we want to make sure everything that is before the boil, our pot, our spoon, all that, we want to make sure that's all clean. And we want to clean that with preferably something like OxyClean. There are commercially available alternatives, things that are specifically made for breweries. They're very similar to OxyClean. You just got to make sure that you use free, that it doesn't have any dyes or perfumes or anything like that in it, because that can carry over into your beer. the reason we want to use this instead of regular dish soap is that the soap can actually leave a film on your dishes that normally you wouldn't notice. But if you actually pay close attention, you fill a pot like this. We've already washed this before we started, but you could fill it up and start to heat it, and you might see, with just water in it, you might see like a slightly oily film on the surface. And that's actually a little bit of soap I don't know, soap scum, but soap residue. And that can have a very severe effect on the beer later on down the line. And then anything that's going to touch the beer, which right now, before we've fermented it, it's called wort. It's spelled like wort, but pronounced like wort, or so I've read. Anything that's going to touch the wort after the boil needs to be sanitized. And I use a Star San brand. It's an acid sanitizer, and there's all kinds of different commercially available sanitizers. That's just what was available for me and easiest to acquire. As long as it's food grade, odorless, tasteless, and you follow the directions that come with it. Some of them require rinsing, some of them don't. Some of them require a 1 minute or a 2 minute contact time. As long as you follow your directions, you're going to be fine. And that's really it. You want to sanitize literally everything that's going to come into contact with it. The scissors that you use to cut your yeast bag open, the yeast bag itself.
Wow.
Yeah, your thermometers, everything. So now, have we got her fully stirred?
I see a few chunks floating yet. I've been trying to work them in.
Okay. Well, we just got to work this in and get this fully dissolved and bring her to a boil. And then...
Oh, hey, it's boiling.
Cool.
Now what do we do?
We wait.
We wait.
10 minutes.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Well. Okay. Time's up. Now we've got to cool it. You notice we've covered it up because now that we're done boiling, we no longer have the heat of the boil to sanitize anything and help prevent bacteria. So now we've got to protect it. So, excuse me. What we're going to do now, basically we're just going to take this beast, and we've got the sink full of ice water, and we're going to put this into the ice water. And whoa, got too much ice water here. What we need to do is get this down to 70 degrees, at least below 80, cool to the touch. That way when we put the yeast in, we don't immediately kill it from the heat. So we're going to wait a little while for this to cool off, and then we'll start the transfer. Alright, we're back. We've already gone ahead and cooled it and transferred it. We made a slight miscalculation earlier. I remembered my recipe wrong. There should have been, oh, I love that sound. There should have been 2 cups of malt extract. Oops. What that will mean is that we're going to have a little less sugar in here for the yeast to go crazy on. So it may not actually be a bad thing because the last starter I made actually blew out of the airlock. So we're not going to get as vigorous a starter. We're not going to get as high of a cell count. But considering pitching this by itself is fine and acceptable, I don't foresee any kind of problem.
Okay.
So the next step, and the semi-final step here, is to add the yeast. A process commonly known as pitching. Let me go ahead and cut this open. We sanitize the scissors, we sanitize this, pack it.
So would you say that if somebody made the same mistake whenever they tried to brew for the first time, they'd be alright as well?
Yeah. A lot of people like to freak out about certain things, but really, this process is almost idiot-proof. I mean, that's not to say that, you know, if we tried hard enough, we couldn't mess it up, say with like really dull scissors that won't cut the yeast packet open. Why don't you pull that foam off?
Sure, of course.
Pull it off. Now, this is going to be like a sludge.
Oh,
that's the yeast.
Okay. Oh, peanut butter.
Yeah. You want to taste?
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm okay.
I've used the slants, which are like the big test tubes or vials, and I've now used these, and I gotta say, I prefer the slants. Those, you shake them up, you pour them in, you're done. None of this squeezing toothpaste stuff. But, you know, after going through this, I'm now very glad we decided to make a starter for this, because I don't know if I'm going to get all of this yeast out of here. I really don't like this. This packaging. I've never seen it before, and I hope to never see it again. I think I got it all. I don't know. This is all light proof. I think we're good. It feels like just wrinkles. Okay, take our stopper. Stopper it up fairly snug. Take our sanitized S bubble lock. The S is for spike. We take our sanitizer. We don't take our sanitizer yet. First of all, we want to get this a good shake. If you've got a magnetic stir plate handy, this is the ideal time to have your stir bar in there and get it going on there. What we're doing now is getting the yeast into flocculation so that it's floating in here. We're also helping to introduce a little bit of oxygen into the mixture. Flocculation is just a nerdy term for floating. Hoping to get some of these chunks broken up.
Well, if it's the yeast, won't they just break that down anyway? Does it matter that it's kind of clumpy?
Not as much. It's not as big of a deal. I just like to see it mix better. I'm going to take some sanitizer. There's a mark on the S bubble here, and we're going to fill it up to about that mark. You can overfill this, but it's very rare for one to suck back in. As the yeast does its thing, consumes sugars and oxygen, creates carbon dioxide and alcohol, it's going to push that carbon dioxide out through here. This will start bubbling hopefully within the next 12 hours. So we'll check back on it tomorrow, and here in about 2 or 3 days we'll be ready to brew. This will have foam up, you know. If it's anything like my last one, it'll have foam coming out of the airlock. So that's why I didn't worry about adding the extra malt that we missed. Also, I didn't worry about topping it up because this is already diluted more than it should be. So this should turn out just fine, and we're gonna basically just set this somewhere and forget about it for a few days. Every time we walk past it, we're gonna pick it up and kind of give it a little shake to help keep the yeast in flocculation. And aside from that, it's just ignore it. Keep it out of direct sunlight. Keep it roughly 70 degrees. And whenever it's at a term called high crozin, which means the foam is at its best, the yeast is at its most active, that's the perfect time to pitch it. So that's it. That's our yeast starter, or without the stir plate, but that's another video. And hope you guys have learned something.
I know I have.
All right. So we'll see you back in a couple of days when we brew 5 gallons of, is it English brown that you picked up?
Yeah, English brown ale.
English brown ale in a few days. See you later. Spike from Dudes Unlimited.
I'm Dano.
Reminding you, never back down from a bad idea.